Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one, we're going to be covering all the best spells and incantations in Elden Ring. We're going to be covering everything the best we can, basically, more or less, pretty much most of the better spells and incantations that are in the game. Everything will be covered in thorough detail, and we're going to start here with the S tier, and the first one that I'm going to show is Comet Azur. Comet Azur makes it onto S tier for me for the fact that it can destroy the majority of bosses in the game in a matter of seconds. That alone puts it into the S tier category for me. It's one of a couple that I have here, but generally speaking, the damage is incredibly high. It has fantastic range. It can wipe bosses off the map entirely, putting it into the S tier category. And the next one is one that I buffed up recently in a video, I think on Thursday, and that is Night Comet. Night Comet is absolutely S tier. It is an incredible spell. It has fantastic range and damage. 2 Staves of Loss will boost it by 60%, and the majority of bosses can't see it coming. It is a phenomenal spell. And it's something that can really hit bosses incredibly hard. It's something that if you haven't used as far as spells go, you're not going to want to look past Night Comet. Night Comet's one of those things where you can just kind of put in your back pocket, and if you're ever having trouble with a boss, you can use this spell, even throw on some buffs for massive damage. Even on New Game Plus 7, I was able to destroy the majority of bosses in the game with ease. Night Comet is no slouch. It is an incredible spell with insanely high damage. And what about incantations? Well, for the first one here, I want to show off, and by the way, there's spoilers obviously here, is Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, which is my favorite incantation in the game, simply for the fact that it's basically a nuke, and after some buffs, you can destroy the majority of bosses in the game in a single shot, making it absolutely S tier. By the way, this was on New Game Plus 7. A couple months back, I did this clip, and yeah, you can absolutely destroy the majority of bosses in the game simply by just using one incantation. That's Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. It is universally great. It's definitely a personal favorite too, and now that buffs are back, this is one you're going to want to try. Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike is definitely S tier, no doubt, no question about that. Let's get into the God tier, S tier category. I have a ton of spells in the A category, which are all great, but for the S tier, for the God tier incantations and spells, I have Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, Night Comet, and Comet Azur. We covered all of them with different clips. They're all phenomenally powerful spells and incantations, stuff that you're not going to want to miss out on. Let's get into the A tier. For the A tier, I'm not going to show every individual one. We're going to go over the list, though, thoroughly. For the first one here, though, that I want to highlight is Bloodflame Blade, which is something that is really powerful. You can put on a ton of different weapons in the game, gives you bleed buildup, a little bit of fire damage, and it can shred boss HP. As far as the A tier stuff goes, I'm going to get into it a little bit more here, but I just want to state real quick, I didn't include any of the buffs in the game. These are all damaging spells in one way or another. I left buffs out. For me, they're all top tier anyway. That would be a different video or a different suggestion. For this, though, we went with all damaging ones. And the next one to highlight here is Adula's Moonblade. Adula's Moonblade is basically my bread and butter when I'm running my mage character because of the fact that you get extreme damage, a lot of frost buildup too, and then the range on it for the fact that it's a sword in general or basically a magic weapon. It's just really great. It's something that you're going to want to try for sure. And Adula's Moonblade is something for me that's really good for mob control and whatnot too. This is definitely something you're going to want to pick up. You're going to want to use this if you're a mage for sure. If you want to build up frost, if you want to do a lot of damage, it's something you can buff like crazy too. And next up, after the moon on screen here, I want to highlight Shard Spiral. So I came to the realization not too long ago that Shard Spiral, especially against larger targets in the game, is one of the better spells. It can do an insane amount of damage as it goes through the bosses, like literally through them, because it basically damages them the entire time it goes through. So if you're using, it's like a piercing spell. If you're using this against larger targets, you're going to chew through their HP with this. This is A tier for that alone for me. It has high damage cap, a very, very high damage cap, and a lot of potential. Shard Spiral is no doubt A tier. I want to mention real quick, if you're not subbed, definitely be sure to sub for constant Elden Ring content, and let's get into the A tier. So for the A tier, I have Meteorite of Astel. We have Burno Flame, which can do massive fire damage. Swarm of Flies for the bleed buildup alone. Scouring Black Flame has a wide spread and does percentage damage. Black Flame Fireball, very convenient and has low faith requirements for the damage you can get. Bloodflame Blade and Catch Flame's really great too, because it scales really well with faith. You can get a lot of damage out of whatever you're putting on. Electrify Armament's really good. Pest Threat is fantastic for larger targets. It absolutely shreds them. Carian Slicer for up close targets, very good. Adula's Moonblade, Crystal Torrent, some people prefer it over Comet Azur. I like Comet Azur better, but it obviously can be spammed for massive damage. Loretta's Mastery is really powerful and has a ton of range, and then Stars of Ruin for the tracking alone. That's definitely something you're going to want in your spell kit. And now onto the also good category. And for the also good category, I want to start off by showing Rennala's Full Moon, but Ranni's Dark Moon obviously is there too. They're both essentially debuffs, but I like them. They're very good spells in general for the fact that you do get the debuff and a little bit of damage. And another one I want to show off here is Rykard's Rancor. I also think I forgot to put it on the list, but I can add in Ancient Death Rancor too. They're both pretty mid-tier, but in general, they can have their uses and they can be powerful if you use them under the right circumstances. And Rykard's Rancor is especially fun, given the fact that you get obviously all that fire damage, the explosions and whatnot. These are two cool spells to combine together as well if you're doing death sorceries. And as far as damage goes, it's definitely something where you're going to be like, well, the damage is just all right, but they're fun enough to use. The damage is there, and you can combine these two together, combine a couple of them together to make good use out of them. So they're definitely in the also good category for me, at least as far as myself goes. I believe that they're definitely going to fit into that category. They do enough damage, and again, it's something that's really enjoyable to use. They're two interesting spells, that's for sure. And Rykard's Rancor especially is a little bit aesthetically pleasing too. And next up here is Lightning Spear. Lightning Spear is obviously in the also good category, given the fact that it has a lot of range. It can be boosted by the Godfrey icon, and after some buffs and whatnot too, you can destroy a lot of the mobs. You can even take on bosses with Lightning Spear. It's a little, again, a little above the mid-tier pack of spells and incantations, but it has its uses. It's powerful, it has a lot of range, and again, you can take out a ton of mobs with it. It's definitely something I like to have in my toolkit. From running a lightning build that's based on faith, and in this case it is. You're using something that's based on faith if you're using Electrify Armament, which can be really powerful. As I mentioned, I had that in the 8s here, and then you can throw on Lightning Spear, and you can even use something like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike as your massive damage incantation for bosses. It's a good combination to combine those together, and Lightning Spear is a good complement to it. And without further ado comes up the also good category, which has a lot of spells and incantations. These are all fun to use and can be quite powerful. Now real quick, you're going to see Shard Spiral on here, but Shard Spiral is meant to go on the 8 tier. After I realized how much damage it can go to large targets, I had it on here and not the other one. It's kind of in between both, but I ended up moving it onto the 8 tier and moving on now with the also good. You have Comet, which is really simply outclassed by Night Comet. Giant's Flame Take Thee for the giant fireball damage. Glintstone Pebble because it's your starting spell and it really is quite powerful. Lightning Spear, which we highlighted. Fire's Deadly Sin because it can reproc on proc Frost, so that's really convenient. Frenzied Burst is really, really awesome how that's basically a sniper rifle. And then Order's Blade, which obviously adds holy damage. Flame of Frenzy and Unedurable Frenzy can both do damage, and obviously they're better for PvP, but even in PvE and mobs, you can use them against them. And then Great Glintstone Shard I have on here too. That's also quite good. And we continue with Glintstone Shard, which can be used to quickly fire Glintstone Pebble, basically. Cannon of Haima, if I'm saying that right, that can be very powerful. Carian Greatsword too. Carian Piercer, and then we have Loretta's Greatbow. Obviously, Loretta's Mastery is an upgrade there. And then we have Ranni's Dark Moon and Rennala's Full Moon. Rock Blaster, and I know some people think Rock Sling is great, but for me, a little bit of posture damage to slow casting time, it's just good for me. It's not on the great tier for me. Cards Rancor, which can be a lot of fun to use, so I kind of threw it in here. Not the highest damage though. And then the best to avoid category, these are spells and incantations I would recommend avoiding. As far as our best to avoid list, I know this can be a little bit polarizing, but for me, I have Black Flame Blade on it because it's too short. It's like drawstring grease. It's just so short that I don't like having to reapply it that fast. Death Lightning in general, I haven't found much use for. Elden Stars is incredibly underwhelming. Lance Axe's Glaive, however you say it, it has a wide sweep that honestly hasn't really helped me that much. As far as regular Lightning Strike goes, it's just outclassed by Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike by a landslide. Scarlet Aeonia, because there's other better ways to apply Rot as far as applying Rot, and it does leave you very vulnerable. Not a huge fan of that. Vike's Dragon Bolt, I know that's going to be a little bit polarizing, so let me explain that one real quick. Vike's Dragon Bolt is the same damage as Electrify Armament, except the fact that it also gives you a body buff that really isn't that useful for me, and it can end up wiping out Howl or Flame Grant Me Strength just to get the same damage that you would get from Electrify Armament. For me, it's just not really worth that. I'd rather use Electrify Armament with some other buffs. And then Glintstone Ice Crag, as far as that goes, it has incredibly short range. There's much better ways of applying Frost than that one. And then last but not least, some really fun ones, but dragon incantations in general that I like. I didn't really cover much of them in this video or go into it very thoroughly, but as far as the ones that I like personally, I don't use them very often. Rotten Breath, Dragon Maw, Dragon Claw, Dragon Ice, and then Grail's Roar is really cool for the debuff and the damage that it does. All of those I like a lot. I hope this was helpful as far as this tier list goes. There's so many incantations and spells in the game that this was a little bit difficult to do. I tried to be as thorough as possible while also making the video not too long. But for me, after the hours that I've put in, this is basically where I would put everything, the best spells, and even the ones to avoid. If you're not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join that. There's over 400 people in there now. I started a Patreon if you want to support the channel even further. If you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. There's like an entire library there now. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.